Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Live with Breathe America. As you know, my name is Patrick Wickard. I'll be your host tonight. And tonight we're going to tackle a very, very interesting subject. At least for me, it's a very interesting subject. And I think it's something that is on everybody's mind right now with the current state of how things are going on in the world today. We have a very, very special guest tonight. She is somebody that I have a professional working relationship with, or have had a professional working relationship with years ago. And she is involved in many, many different aspects of the testing and procedural processes with new medications and treatments for things that are happening in the medical world. So I would like to introduce you guys to a very good friend and an amazing woman. Her name is Jennifer Poralla. Jennifer, welcome to Live with America, and thank you so much for being willing to jump on here and do this with me. It's been a long time since we've talked. It's been a hectic couple of years. Oh, you are welcome. You are welcome. And it has. It's been a hectic couple of years for both of us. How you been?
I've been well. I've been well. It's definitely been interesting. I would say this year tops the couple of years. We'll go ahead. And 2019 was good, but 20, what has this been?
It's been a shit show. Oh, did I say that? Yeah, I said that. Yeah, it's been a crazy couple of years for sure. I'd like to give you the opportunity to tell everybody what you do, the company that you own it or just work for. I don't remember anymore. You're kind of the boss at everything you do. So,
so I am actually the director, but I'm also a partner. So I own Advanced Specialty Research, and I advance medicines through pharmaceutical companies. So I have a plethora of things that I do, but clinical research is the main thing. So that's why I'm here. Thank you so much for inviting me. We study several different drugs and devices, and work directly with pharmaceutical companies as well as the FDA in order to make sure that there's safe products going out on the market. So that's what I do.
So now, to everybody that's watching, I'm sure it's not a leap for you guys to understand exactly why we're having this conversation. Just so you know, we are going to get into the coronavirus vaccine a little bit later in the show. And I know those comments are going to start coming here real soon. And yes, we are going to talk about it, but we wanted to really jump into what is the normal process a medication has to go through in order to become approved for use in the U.S.
So there's 4 different phases of trials, and what happens is normally they're tested obviously on animals first, and then they go to the first phase. The first phase, phase 1, there's usually 500 or more. Well, there's usually about 50 participants, and it goes on for minimum of 2 years on that particular one. That's where they develop safety, and they decide that if it's actually safe for human use. So they only get people that are completely healthy. And after that has actually got all the data from that, then they decide if it's safe for phase 2. Phase 2 then happens and can take place. Those timelines vary depending on the drug, but phase 2 is where they actually decide efficacy as well as they continue to monitor safety. Now, keep in mind, they have to make sure that all the data is in, because if they have too many SAEs, they'll actually shut it down. An SAE is a serious adverse event where they had an unanticipated problem with the drug. So at that point, after they've gone on to phase 2 and they've developed the safety and they're looking at the efficacy, then they go on to phase 3. Phase 3 is efficacy, and then they're going into the marketing portion, and then it has to meet each one of their certain criteria in order to make it. Now, every protocol is a little bit different, but they have to have the data from each trial in before they can go on to that next phase. It has to be approved by the FDA. And then phase 4 is the other trials, but those are only if it's already been out on the market, it's already been approved by the FDA, and they're looking at different indications. So that's the basic short-term answer for what the phases are they have to go through.
Now, from the time a medication is ready to start its testing process to the time that it's actually approved for use inside of the United States, what is the typical timeline that takes place in?
There's going to be about a 5 to 10 year span.
5 to 10 years?
5 to 10 years, not months, years.
5 to 10 years. So on a normal basis, in a normal situation, even if, let's say, you had a cure for cancer, it would take 5 to 10 years before that could be used publicly inside the United States due to the rules that are out there.
Absolutely. I mean, you have to keep in mind, if you're giving an investigational drug and it's actually being put into a human, yeah, you might watch it and you might see what's going on in those first phase trials. But the reason that the safety keeps going over the next phase 2 and phase 3 and even beyond is because you don't know how long it's going to react in that body. It just got put in that human body in phase 1. And animals don't usually live long enough. They don't follow them long enough to really know how it's going to react. That's why they go into phase 1 and they do it with humans. So you've got, and you know, you've got drugs that have been out on the market for years that are already approved, that they then have class action lawsuits and they actually go back and pull them because they realize that even though they got all that solid data, you know, maybe 20 years down the road, it's not doing so good in some people. And that's kind of scary when you start pushing drugs through too fast.
You know what's interesting to me is that timeline is really interesting to me because, like, let's say there's like some major breakthrough in any disease, in any development of a medication, right? And it's viable, it's provable, it's factual. And yet people are going to continue to suffer for 5 to 10 years before it can even be used as a treatment, even if it's an all-out cure. That's it. That timeline. I think that's something a lot of people don't understand is how long it actually takes to get a medication through. And it's actually the exact reason why I asked you that question. I want to talk about adverse side effects a little bit. So if a medication is being tested, how many adverse side effects is considered acceptable? Because, you know, we see all these like pharmaceutical commercials and it's like may cause, and then you got this really fast speaking voice. It's like, blah, 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 like listing off all of these things. So
right.
How many side effects are acceptable?
So I'm going to talk a little bit about the blah, 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 blah that gets listed really quick, including,
sure,
you know, anal seepage they try to get in there that nobody wants to hear. But what happens with that is, first thing is if they're not doing their clinical research right and they're not asking medical history, you're going to hear things like, you know, headaches may cause stomach upset. Well, if that person was honest when they actually came into the clinic and decided to be a participant, they should have listed some of those side effects. So I think that some side effects that show up, or adverse events rather, are actually medical history from the individual and not true side effects. So take some of it with a grain of salt, really, because that's just individuals that are not answering the questions right or not getting proper medical diagnoses, and then things are showing up. As far as the amount of AEs that are acceptable, it depends on if they're serious or not. So AEs, as far as an adverse event, if it's just causing, you know, mild symptoms that are not going to affect their lifestyle, then they can overlook some of those because obviously the risk outweighs the benefit, right? But when they're serious adverse events, you know, things that are going to completely change their lifestyle to where they're not going to be the same, or they're going to be hospitalized, or the ultimate one, death, right? Because you can't come back from that. Those ones, it does depend on the drug, and you can have actually quite a few different ones depending on the indication. There's not really a set number because it depends on the drug itself and what they're looking at. When the FDA looks at it and they agree to a protocol, they push back on the pharmaceutical companies and make it to where the protocol itself that they have to go off of will indicate certain objectives and certain endpoint criterias. And it's not the AEs or the SAEs that would end it, it's those endpoints. So for instance, if you have a drug that is for pregnancy, and it's to help with something within that pregnancy, but you have so many people that end up developing, you know, serious preeclampsia, or they're losing babies, and there's so many of those, then they'll end the trial because of those endpoints, but not because of the AEs and not because of the SAEs. So they look at different endpoints in clinical research.
That's interesting. That's interesting. How many medications come through without side effects?
I haven't had any that I've studied, and I've been doing it for about 15, 20 years. So I haven't seen one that's come through without side effects.
Wouldn't, yeah, so they just don't exist. Now, what would happen if a medication were to come through that it actually had no side effects? Would the FDA even test it?
Actually, I don't know the answer to that. I really don't know the answer, only because the FDA does not test things that are natural. So anytime you get into old medication on what they used to use way back in the day and what a lot of naturopaths use, they don't test it. They don't. And so they only test it if it's actually a medication that is of modern science.
Which means it can be owned and profited off of in a way that helps the pocketbooks of the companies that do this.
So this is where it's kind of a touchy subject, but a lot of times pharmaceutical companies get dinged for it. But if you look at the lump sum that actually goes into government, it's not really the pharmaceutical companies, in my opinion.
That's interesting. No, I can see that. So let's jump into the kind of the differences in patients that actually we do trials with.
Okay.
When specific medications come out, you said it only is tried with healthy individuals, but if you're testing a specific medication for a specific treatment, doesn't it require that person to have that illness already or that problem?
So phase 1 is the only one that they put it in healthy individuals. So if you're testing a medication and it's the first time in human subjects, then it's healthy individuals that they put it in for phase 1 because they're trying to test safety. So those are people that don't have a compromised immune system and are extremely healthy. What ends up happening is when you go into phase 2, that's when they start looking at people that actually have that indication. So if you're looking for people, they will actually have certain criteria, certain inclusion and exclusion that they have to meet in order to qualify for the trial. So that's when they start actually putting it into the people that do have those particular issues.
Okay. And so they verify first that in a normal, healthy human, there's limited negative side effects or, at least not death caused by taking this first.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the first phase, what they end up doing is they bring people in that first phase when they're doing phase 1 clinical trials, and they want them completely healthy, no underlying health issues whatsoever, because they're trying to get a baseline to find out what maybe will happen safety-wise. Then when they go into phase 2, there's definite criteria, and you have to, obtain medical records and question them and make sure that they don't have it. Usually you'll do blood tests and all kinds of different tests to make sure that they truly meet the criteria before ever giving them the drug. So that would be considered the screening time, and they haven't actually had drug yet. So you're actually looking to make sure they're truly safely going to qualify in it, even if they're sick. So there are rare instances when, you had talked before about why certain individuals can't get medications, like for cancer, for instance. And that's where clinical research kind of is a fun area, only because that's something that is available. And that's a lot of reasons why participants will come to me for research, is because they don't have it available to them anywhere else, and they're willing to try it because nothing else is working. So that's part of the reason why I actually do clinical research, is it offers something to people that's not available out there anywhere else.
All right. How long have you been in this trade, in this business? How long have you been participating in clinical trials and this kind of stuff?
So about 15 years.
15 years. Now, when you get a new medication in to test, how does it stay with your clinic all the way through to the end?
So the trials so the pharmaceutical companies or CROs go out and pick sites based on if they can enroll for the trial and if they have the demographics. And there's a lot other avenues that go into it. The drug itself will only be at one clinic for that particular phase. They may get recruited again for another trial, a different phase. The trials that I'm currently doing, I've been on some that are phase 2, phase 2A, phase 3, and they will continue on with me. It doesn't always work that way. Sometimes, depending on the data that they got, they need to get a different demographic. So they have to actually diversify a little, because our populations are obviously different by where we live.
No, absolutely. So that actually factors in too. Like, so you're obviously, for those that don't know, Jennifer actually lives locally here in Idaho, and that's where her demographic is. So if they need a different demographic, they will actually go and have another place in another area that has a different population density of different ethnic backgrounds and stuff like that, and test there as well.
Exactly. Because when you put in for trials, we have to offer trials to anybody. It doesn't matter what their race is. And what happens is on certain medications, they are looking for certain diverse populations. So we will only get it for a certain time point, or it's global and then it's everywhere, and they just take from each population. And that depends on the company, the drug, and where it's at in the approval phase.
Okay. No, I think that's good. Now, in your opinion, do you think the 5 to 10 year process and all these different phases that a medication has to go through are you a fan of that system? Do you think that that's important that we maintain that?
Absolutely, 100% I do, just because you're putting something into a human body, and I wouldn't personally feel comfortable taking something if it didn't have the time to show true symptoms and true side effects. I mean, you look at certain foods that you eat and you watch yourself develop allergies over a certain period of time because of that certain food. The human body is very complex. So I think it's extremely important.
So you like the 5 to 10 year process in order to get a medication approved or a treatment approved?
I really do. I wholeheartedly believe in it. I believe in research, and I believe in what I do, and collecting viable data and making sure that it is a safe drug that's going out on the market is extremely important to me.
All right, now I want to jump into something. Do you do studies and tests on vaccinations, and is that process different?
I do, actually. I do several different studies with vaccines. And no, it's not any different. We still have the same timelines. I've been working on an RSV vaccine with several different companies, and I've been working on it for years. Since 2014, my site has actually been working with multiple companies for a vaccine for it. And no, it's no different. You go through the same stringent. If anything, I feel like it's a little more strict than some medications, because it's an injection. You're putting it directly into their system. It's once you put it in, you can't get it out.
So let's talk about that a little bit, because this is something that I think, I know just a little bit about it, not a ton. I'm no expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I do know that when you give a medication intravenously, you are literally skipping the body's defense system for everything, right? So is that true? I mean, am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, you're understanding that correctly. So intramuscular is going to be obviously a little bit different. Most of our vaccines are given IM, but you still, like I said, you can have systemic reactions, local reactions, and you truly, depending on the medication and what it is that's in that vaccine, you don't know what it's going to do. So, I mean, it's a little scary, and you have to remember on vaccines, there's a lot of anti-vaxxers out there, and I truly feel that everybody's entitled to their own opinion, but you have to remember on vaccines that there is a certain population that shouldn't receive vaccines. I mean, if you know that you have a mutated gene, you definitely want to proceed with caution, and I think that the anti-vaxxers have kind of wholeheartedly taken over, because there is a misunderstanding and a misconception about the mutated gene. And unfortunately, I don't think there's enough education on it. So you just have to be really careful and know what you're doing. So, oh, you disappeared.
Yeah, you did too. We're back, though. I don't know. Are we back? Are we good?
We're good.
John, give me a thumbs up in the background. We good? I don't know what happened to you guys, but we're back. Okay. So I forgot what we were talking. No, I didn't.
Apples. We were talking about apples and how they grow.
Apples. Yes. No.
Apples.
Slowly. So if vaccines go through the same process as medication, and this is a process that you obviously, well, actually, here I have another question. We'll get to that. I'm biting at the bit to get to what I really want to talk about, but I want to really set this up. I I want to make sure I cover everything.
Okay.
Based on your experience, and this is what you do for a living,
Correct.
what percentage of medications that make it into the trial process actually make it to the point where they're approved for human use?
1%.
Say that again.
1%. 1%. 1%.
Wait, say that one more time for the people in the back.
1%. 1% makes it.
Okay,
Correct.
so let me see if I can wrap my head around this for a second. You're telling me that of all the medications that are made or manufactured or thought up or developed, vaccines included, that only 1% of those actually make it through the clinical trial process in order to become safe and usable for human use.
That's correct. That's correct.
And that process takes 5 to 10 years.
Correct.
In fact, a fast-track medication takes what, 7 years? 5 to 7?
That's correct.
That's as fast as they can get it done, you guys. Like, that's interesting to me. That's very, very interesting to me. Now let's get on to the fun one. The coronavirus vaccination that is coming out and being tested right now. Now, I want to paraphrase or preface this part of the conversation with this. There are some things that Jennifer can talk about, and there are some things that she cannot. If we touch on something that she cannot, she is obviously not going to be able to bring or be able to talk about it. But we're going to go ahead and have as much of a conversation about it as we can. Do you feel like this medication has met the same or that this vaccination has met the same requirements as other vaccinations in order to get to the point where it's at right now?
Not that I've seen, no. No.
Do you think that it went through the stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and stage 4 processes to be, where it's currently at, where they're talking about approving it for human consumption in the next few months?
They combined the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. So they're doing it. They're just doing it at the same time.
Do you think that that's an ethical decision?
No, I don't. I would have loved to seen the data from phase 1 before they started phase 2. I would have loved to see the data from phase 2 before they started phase 3. However, with the given circumstances, that's what they've been made to do.
Now, it's interesting you word it that way. That's what they've been made to do based on the given circumstances. So tell me this. What's different about this than any other vaccine for any other illness that we've ever studied or tried to develop?
There isn't anything different. There's nothing different. Nothing whatsoever. If you back way up and you look at history and you look at what happened with polio, it speaks for itself. I mean, it speaks for itself. That was a train wreck. It was a complete train wreck. Look what happened.
If it hasn't met the same stringent guidelines for this 1% approval rate for medications that they hold true through all of these years of the FDA and these clinical trials, and it's not meeting the same standard, how are we okay with them literally stacking the different phases of the trial together, where you're trying to get phase 3 answers to questions when you don't even have phase 1 data all at the same time?
Yeah, you gotta wonder. You really gotta wonder.
So what you're telling me is that they are taking this vaccination and they are now testing it in healthy human beings?
Correct.
People with the illness?
Correct.
And what's phase 3? What changes at phase 3?
Phase 3, the only thing that they're looking at is the efficacy and the different endpoints. That's it. So you have to get through phase 1 and phase 2 in order to do phase 3. And
so they're trying to draw their data for phase 3 as far as the end results that happen based on phase 1 and phase 2 results that aren't even in yet.
Correct.
Can I just come out and say that I think that's an absolute joke?
You absolutely can. I'm just going to sit here and smile.
I'm going to say it. I think it's an absolute joke. I think rushing a vaccination like this in 10 months is absolutely ridiculous. And I cannot believe the people that are okay with this. Like, the fact that the FDA would do this. And like something I've never spoke about is how we met, right? The things that I've done, things I do in other places, right? Like I've never spoke about it because honestly, I can't.
Right.
But I've dealt with the FDA. I've dealt with them. I've dealt with getting a medication approved. I've had to go through this process on a different level for something totally separate that like I said, that I haven't talked about.
Right.
And literally got laughed at. Like literally thought it's never going to happen. Got shut down, got kicked out. Like never going to, like the process is so difficult, you guys. I can't even begin to tell you the headaches involved in actually getting a medication from concept and theory and being able to test it. The animal testing part, all that stuff is easy. But to get from that point to human trials to actually the FDA looking at it and stuff, like I'm telling you, it's one of the most ridiculously difficult processes I've ever witnessed in my entire life. And to then a few years later be sitting here and watching them push through a vaccination in 10 months scares the hell out of me. Now,
absolutely.
I want to jump into something that very few people are talking about, and that is the fact that, from what I understand, that the coronavirus vaccinations are RNA vaccinations. Is that correct?
There are multiple different coronavirus vaccines out right now that they're looking at. So that would be one. That's correct.
One of them is an RNA vaccination. Now, you guys, I don't know a ton about RNA vaccinations, but I do know that it actually literally changes our DNA in order to make us immune to the illness. Is that correct? Is that a correct statement in a very generalized way of putting it?
It is, yes.
Right now, as we speak, there are human beings that are taking a vaccination or having a vaccination tried in them that is literally changing their DNA. And it's literally started 10 months ago. Wow.
That's correct. That is correct.
Wow. Stacy Lynn, an RNA is a type of DNA. RNA is in our DNA, and it's something that they have figured out how to manipulate. A lot of the early science. Let me clarify something. I don't want you guys to be like sitting there thinking RNA is scary. Some of the early science and some of the stuff that they've looked into as far as this goes is actually really promising. But this is there is not a single other active RNA vaccination on the market right now. It has never been approved yet, and yet it's being tested already. And very quickly, when did they start talking about RNA vaccinations for the first time? We're within probably 10 years. Am I correct?
2008 maybe.
2008, 2009, somewhere in that time frame.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, this is very new idea. I mean, this was literally the idea, 10 years ago, and now it's now being tested, like legitimately tested, and it's something that I find really, really scary. And if we don't know yet which vaccination, like Jennifer says, there's several different vaccinations that they're testing right now. Several different companies have done several different things. We don't know which one's going to get approved. We don't know if all of them are going to get approved. We don't know which ones that they're going to be, trying to get us to take.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
You can look on clinicaltrials.gov. You can type in COVID, and you can see how many different companies have actually jumped on and are looking at not just vaccines, but treatments. And you'll be mind blown at how many trials are actually going on now for COVID.
Actually, in human trials already. And how long? Let's look at this from a different perspective, because I want to make sure everybody's getting this the way that I see it. If the disease started in end of 2019, let's say December of 2019, right? That means we're about 11 months into this thing right now. It wasn't even really known what we were dealing with until February. I think that's safe to say, March timeframe, which means we're really only about 7 months into actually knowing what we're dealing with. Okay, so 8 months. Now, if we learned about a disease 7 months ago, 8 months ago, that was different than COVID. Let's just take COVID out of it, and we're talking about some other imaginary disease. From the time we learn about it to the time that we're testing a medication in a human being, what would that timeline look like for any other situation?
10 to 12 years.
10 to 12 years?
Correct, because they have to learn more about the actual disease. Then they actually have to do bench work on it. They have to test it in animals. They don't usually just pick one animal. It depends on the disease and what they're looking at. Usually it's going to be a rat, then usually it goes into a bunny, then usually it goes into a beagle. And so it's time. It takes time. Then they start into the actual human phase trials.
Rats, bunnies, and beagles.
Rats, bunnies, and beagles. They used to use apes, monkeys.
They used to use monkeys. They don't use monkeys anymore.
Nope.
Turns out beagles are closer to us in DNA than monkeys are, which I found fascinating.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
I had no idea. It's one of the craziest things. It's one of the craziest things I've ever learned. Beagles.
Yeah, makes you look.
That process takes 10 to 12 years from the discovery of an illness before human trials would even be possible in any other situation. Why is this one different?
Well, it depends on if you listen to media or if you look at the disease itself. I mean, we know it's a SARS disease, but it's that's a hard one. But I'm going to say that social media is huge, and it's the pandemic. It is what it is.
See, I think you just hit the nail on the head. I think and it's the word pandemic. This has been described as a pandemic. We were made to think that we needed to be afraid. We were made to think that this was going to have this crazy effect on, a huge percentage of the population, which hasn't been true. It is deadly. It does kill people. It is horrible.
Yes, it does.
But it does not have the mortality rate that they were talking 3. Keep in mind, early on, they were talking 2.5 to 3%. We don't even have a solid 1% out of this thing now that we're only 7 months, 8 months into tracking it. So we don't really know yet. Normally that process takes, 10 to 12 years before we have any idea on the best way to treat something. And they're trying to rush a vaccination, including vaccinations that manipulate our DNA. Ladies and gentlemen, I am not a fan of this at all. And based on my previous work, based on some of the other things that I've done in my life, I've got to say, this is mind-boggling to me. Mind-boggling to me. I do not get it. I don't get how this is even possible. For a lot of, and I wish I could tell everybody what I was doing before, but and if I did, then you guys would all look at me like, oh my gosh, like what? Like, how's that not a thing yet? Because it's not a thing yet. It takes too much time and too much damn money. And now we've got a pandemic and we've got them going crazy to get a vaccination ready that people are literally going to be lining up to take. And I don't understand it. I really don't understand it.
Well, now the concern is what if they mandate it?
Oh, Jennifer. Oh, girl. I'll you know what? I'll answer that question. If they mandate this vaccination across the country, I am going to stand right here publicly, and I'm going to tell you exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell them they can kiss my ass. No, not happening. Under no situation would I allow them, especially with what I know, and I'm no expert. Guys, I am no expert on this stuff, but I just know a little bit. I've worked in this industry just a little bit with one specific thing, and seeing that process and then watching what happens, there is no way I would allow them to inject that into my body or my children's body. I'm sorry. There's just, I don't think it's a good idea. We don't know. I'm not anti-vaccine. I'm just anti-bad vaccines. I want clean, tested, proven vaccinations that we know are effective. That's it.
Amen. Amen.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that, and yet sometimes you say things like that and people paint you into a corner, say like, wow, you're an anti-vaxxer. You're tinfoil hat. No, turns out I just want it to be tested, you guys. That's it. I want it to hold up to scrutiny in that same 10 to 12 year, followed by the 5 to 10 year process in order to become approved to be used. That might be something you guys missed. Normally, it takes 10 to 12 years before a medication can be being tested. Once it gets to the human trial phase, you're talking 5 to 10 years before it can be approved for human use. And they're talking about this thing's going to be ready in a couple of months. That scares me. It scares me.
Well, they're saying by the end of the year. They're saying by the end of the year.
You know, let me say this, though. I hope to God I'm wrong. I really do. I hope that it is as the miracle that it is, because I know a lot of people are gonna line up and they're gonna take that vaccination because they're scared, right? Yep. And for their sake, I hope to God, I pray that it works and it works the way it's supposed to, and there are no side effects to it at all. I really do. But that's not a chance I'm willing to take with my life or my children's life. Right.
Well, we already know that there's side effects. They've already talked about the side effects, so that's been out known. They've also talked about it being 90 to 95% effective. I've never heard that from any vaccine anywhere. So
90 to 95%?
Yep, that's what they're saying.
What is that?
That's what they're saying, and you can read that. You get on any news channel, you'll read that. That's what they're saying. So
man,
yep, those are pretty good odds, though. I mean, that's better than anything I've ever seen.
So wait, what happens to the 5 to 10% that it's not effective with? What, you just get COVID and you get your DNA manipulated for free?
Right. Yeah. Well, that's a question mark. Waits to be seen.
Yeah, this particular situation is one that literally I find very, very disturbing. And I think anybody with even basic understanding of the testing process for vaccinations to go through or medications to go through should also be equally concerned. And it's something that, look, I'm not going to tell you guys what to do. I mean, obviously, I just told you what I'm going to do with it if it does come out, and it is something that we have to do. Oh, I lost her. Wait, what's going on? John, fix the screen. No. There we go. She'll be back here in a second, hopefully. But yeah, I got to tell you guys, like, I'm not going to tell you what to do. Obviously, that's a decision you have to make for yourself. And the reason I wanted to bring Jennifer on, and the reason I wanted to have this conversation with her, is because she's an expert. This is her life. This is what she does. She is every single day involved in the testing and the trial basis of approving medications. One of the questions I hope I get to answer here in a minute is, how many if only 1% of medications that get, make it to the human trial aspect actually get approved, then how many has she actually been involved in? And this is a 15-year career for her at this point. I don't want to sit here and tell you guys that not to take a vaccine or to take a vaccine. That's not my place. Ultimately, that's your decision to make. But I do want you guys to take the time to realize that there's nothing wrong with properly informing yourself on what's going on and what's the normal process, just so you understand exactly how different this process is. This process is very different, and they have managed to circumvent all the normal rules because of the word pandemic. And for me, I find that disturbing, because if coronavirus is a pandemic, then why isn't malaria a pandemic? On average, 2.5 million children under the age of 5 years old die every single year of malaria. Malaria is the deadliest disease ever known to man. It's killed more people than religion. Like, think about that for a second. Killed more people than war. And it normally affects children, you guys. And why aren't we rushing malaria medications through? Why aren't we fighting that fight? Tuberculosis killed 1.5 million people in the United States of America last year. Roughly. Where's the worry about that? where's the concern about that? Why aren't we rushing that through? So ultimately, what the whole point of tonight's show is, guys, is take the time to look into these things. Whichever vaccine gets approved, make a decision on whether or not you're willing to roll that, like 90 to 95% effective. It's a roll of the dice, you guys. 5 to 10% of people it's not going to work for anyways. And some of these vaccines, depending on, like I said, which ones get approved, literally manipulate your DNA. It changes you on a genetic level. There are, I don't know, I have a million thoughts and emotions on this. This is something that hits very close to home due to some other work that I've done in my life. And this is something that I find really, really disturbing. I don't like it. I am concerned for the results for the people that are scared, that do want this, that do think it's okay. And that's why I wanted to do this show tonight. I wanted it to be about the differences in the normal process that a medication or a vaccination has to go through versus what's changed here. And let me tell you guys something. Coronavirus is no different than any other virus that we've had over the year. It has its, we get it, we get sick. There's a mortality rate to it. There's symptoms to it. And yeah, it's bad. I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's not. But the way that we have handled this situation versus the way that we've handled other situations begs the question, why? Why is this one so different? What, not different in the sense that it affects people differently, but why are we handling it so differently? Why is this medication being, or this illness and its treatment being treated with such a different way, in such a different way than all the other ones out there that we have a whole lot more information and data on? I think it begs the question. I think it begs the question, and I hope that each and every single one of you and anybody that sees this, and I hope that you guys share the hell out of this tonight's show. I hope that people get to see this. I hope that people start to understand that this vaccination, this product that they're making has not met the same stringent guidelines that every other medication that you can get prescribed by a doctor has. And this one's going to be free and potentially mandated. Let that sink in for a minute, you guys. It doesn't look like Jennifer's going to be coming back. I want you guys to know that I think we're going to probably have Jennifer back, and we're going to do more on this as time goes on. One of the reasons we had to speak in generalizations as far as the COVID vaccination goes, and only talk about publicly available information, is Jennifer's company is literally going to be involved in some of those trials. So obviously she can't speak on any of that data or any of that information because of NDAs and things like that. So I will say this. I am a whole lot more confident knowing that people like her are the ones looking at the data. And I hope that the people that are doing this, like I said, I pray to God I'm wrong. I hope this is the cleanest, best case scenario for all of us. I just don't happen to think that that's gonna actually how it's going to turn out. But I'm praying that it is. That being said, you guys, I want to thank you all for tuning in tonight. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up with a few of the, with a few thoughts. Fear is a huge motivating factor in why this is happening. It's because generally speaking, the public, us, the American people, we are afraid. We are afraid. We're afraid to hug our friends, our family, our loved ones. We're afraid to go visit people. We're afraid to go out. We're afraid. A lot of us are afraid. And we have a lot of reason to. We've been sold the story, right? We've been sold this story that this is the big bad, right? This is the one. I'm not sure that this is the one. But that's not for me to decide. Ultimately, we all have a choice, right? And it's up to you to decide for yourself whether or not this is something that you want to be involved in or not. You know where I stand on it. I want a clean vaccination. I want a clean medication. I want to know that it has met the same stringent guidelines that 99% of all other medications and vaccinations fail to meet before it is approved to be put into my body or my children's body. I don't think that's too much to ask. And if you guys agree with me, please share this message. Please get it out there. And stop letting fear decide. We're not sheep. We don't just do what we're told. Each and every one of us has a gift. We have a choice. We have a mind of our own, and we can think about these things for ourselves whenever we want. These things, everything we talked about tonight, is publicly known information. It's out there. You can Google it. It's right there. It's easy to find. You can look at the process medications have to go through. Like Jennifer said, you can go and look at all the human trials and the trials that are being done with COVID right now. Go look for yourself and ask yourself if you think that this medication or these medications, these treatments, these vaccinations, because there are hundreds and hundreds of them that are being tested right now, have met the same standard that all other medications have met. Now think about this. If 1% of medications and vaccines get approved for human use, look at the recalls that we see all the time. If you use this medication between this time and this time, please call this number. You may be entitled to a settlement. Remember all those? We see those all the time. Even with only 1% getting approved, they still get it wrong sometimes. That's why this is so important, you guys. Please think about it. Decide for yourself. Decide what you want. Decide if you want to be a part of that or not. And ultimately, that's your decision. And I will never judge you for your decision. I get it. I hope and I pray that this thing works the way that they say it does for everybody that's going to line up and take it. I just won't be in that line, you guys. I love you guys. I want you to have an amazing night. Have an amazing week. Thank you for everything, and thank you for tuning in and watching. And with that said, you guys, please be a little bit better tomorrow than you were today, and be kind to each other. Love you guys. Have a good night. Oh, I'm still here. Someone's slipping.